Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Colin Murphy.
And I'm Katie Gauthier. Thank you for choosing News 5 tonight for your election night headquarters. It's a rare primary election. We haven't had an open seat for governor and for U.S. Senate at the same time in Nebraska since 1978.
And we have live reports from Lincoln, top Senate and gubernatorial candidate stationed. We'll have a live report coming up in the Tri-Cities as well. That will include the race for Adams County Sheriff. But first, let's look at the results. We begin with a big win in the U.S. Senate race tonight. Ben Sasse, obviously the Midland University president. We'll start with the governor right there, the governor's race, and we take a look. And look how close this governor race is.
Very tight race by about 200 votes tonight. Pete Ricketts is leading that race there. John Bruning trailing right behind him.
And you'll want to take a look there. That's going to be a very one that could go late into the night. So stay tuned to News 5. We'll continue to update you. Ricketts and Bruning, you remember the negative advertising between those two. We wondered if a third candidate would slip by. It appears it's going to come down to those two.
And Bo McCoy has pushed above Mike Foley, actually, and it was reversed earlier tonight. And now you see Tom Carlson and Brian Sloan. Those two are trailing in the six-man race.
And we want to take a look at the U.S. Congress right there. Adrian Smith and Tom Brewer, the retired Army Colonel Tom Brewer. Adrian Smith, obviously the incumbent, has served in Washington for many years. He looks like he will move on 65%.
Looks like he'll have the lead there. And now at 2nd District, you can see Lee Terry taking the lead there with 54% of the votes over Dan Fry, sitting at 46% of the votes. So a pretty close race, but it looks like Lee Terry right now has the lead there.
And Jeff Fortenberry, a very popular GOP Congress in the 1st District, 85%, once again running away with this one, as you see, follows Jessica Turek and Dennis Park. Now let's get to that big Senate race, Katie, that we've been talking about for weeks and months.
Ben Sasse already made his acceptance speech tonight, and he has 48% of those votes there. Sid Dinsdale and Shane Osborne both sitting at about 20% of the votes, and then trailing there Bart McClay sitting in 4th.
And we want to definitely make sure that everyone knows that the winner of that race, now moving on to November, Ben Sasse. So he'll face Dave Domina, who defeated Larry Marvin today. Obviously, a lot of people familiar with Dave Domina, a lawyer in the Keystone XL pipeline project for trying to prevent that in Nebraska. Ben Sasse says now is the time for the pipeline, so that should be an issue at the next election.
And he had a pretty strong lead there with 71% of the votes. Now closer to home, let's take a look at the Grand Island mayoral race tonight. And earlier tonight, you can see those results coming up here soon. It was kind of a surprise for us. We did have Jeremy Jensen actually taking the lead earlier tonight. We'll get those poll results too in just a minute. But earlier we had Jeremy Jensen and then Chuck Haase, and trailing that, incumbent Mayor Jay Vavracek.
And last check, we're having a little, we'll bring those to you in a second. Last check, Chuck Haase just pulling in front. It appears Chuck Haase and Jeremy Jensen, so the incumbent, Mayor Jay Vavracek, might not be moving on to November.
Two of them will be moving on.
Okay, well, we'll have a live look at Lincoln. Obviously, Ben Sasse just made his acceptance speech just a little time ago. There it is, the Ben Sasse campaign, as you can see, and our News 5's Lauren Conley was there. But here's what Ben Sasse had to say after accepting his victory tonight for U.S. Senate.
The reality is this race started on Main Street in Fremont, Nebraska, where Melissa and I went to the city fathers and city mothers of my hometown and said simply, we're not going to run unless you think it's a good idea. It truly was a community project from late July when we got serious about this until September 30th when our first fundraising deadline was due. We said we were not going to do this race if on September 30th the people of Fremont didn't tell us they thought it was a good idea. On September 30th, we set the all-time first quarter fundraising in the history of Nebraska politics. And you know what? As of this last week, we still have the most donors and the most dollars raised in Nebraska.
And obviously, Ben Sasse, your victorious winner right there. But the interesting thing was, early on, a couple weeks ago, we thought it was going to be Shane Osborne and Ben Sasse in a close race.
Yeah, so interesting to see that flip tonight. Well, today, voters in Adams County showed up early and often.
Over 100 people walked through the doors within the first 3 hours. Election officials say there were no issues at polling places. Voters say they expected a bigger turnout compared to the 2010 elections. That was for a number of reasons.
There's quite a race for the Senate that we're really interested in the governor race, and school bond issues. So I think that makes it more of an interesting race this year.
Now, a big discussion in Adams County, obviously the sheriff's race. For the first time in 28 years, Adams County voters have to decide the race for county sheriff.
Former Hastings police officer Rick Hallett faced off against incumbent Greg McGee, both on the Republican side of the ticket, making today's vote a winner-take-all. News 5's Chris Shukai is live with the McGee campaign at Laughlin Country Club. Chris?
Thank you, Colin and Katie. With 66% of the votes counted now in Adams County, Greg McGee is leading Rick Hallett. He has 77% of that vote. Sheriff McGee joins us now. A big margin. Are you surprised by that margin?
Well, I am, but it's a very good feeling.
Now, this is the first time that you have had a challenger in really 7 elections. Did you have some concerns?
Absolutely. Took it very serious.
And did you think that maybe that Rick had put on, there was a lot of signs out there, a lot of efforts, and how much did you worry about it?
Well, enough to get enough signs to compete with him, and there's 500 signs out there, and I think it proved to be a good showing.
You've put a lifetime of service into this sheriff's office. This will be your 32nd year of sheriff, 47 years total with the sheriff's department. 4 more years, it looks like, ahead of us now. Did you give any thought, if it didn't work out, what you might have done?
No, but I think I didn't. I think it's I always had confidence that our department, through those years, has proven to be a servant to the people.
You think the message of this vote is that it's as it has been, and we keep things going as it has been?
Absolutely.
All right, Greg McGee, a big win for you. A lot of supporters back here ready for you as well, supporting you. Congratulations also. In another big Adams County race, specifically Hastings, the Hastings School Board with a $21.5 million bond issue going on for an elementary renovation. That also a very big win coming up for them. 72% for that bond issue, 28% against. We will have Superintendent Craig Couts on with us live tomorrow at News 5 Today. That, of course, starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for all of the reaction on that. Colin and Katie, we go back to you live from Laughlin Country Club in Hastings. I'm Chris Shukai, News 5.
Thank you so much, Chris. And you can see quite a crowd there for Sheriff McGee.
And he obviously has had a number of years of service and a ton of supporters, and they showed out tonight. We also had a chance to catch up with his opponent who fell to defeat tonight. Here's what Rick Hallett had to say.
I started campaigning December 2nd, so I've been doing it for 5 months, and I'm glad that it's wound down and it's almost over. Again, I've had real good people working for me. I've met a lot of good people, and it's been a good experience.
Are you having fun tonight?
Yeah. You know, I'm here with my supporters and friends and family, and we're having a good time watching the results come in. And you know, right now we're still feeling happy about it.
Now let's take a look at some of the other elections being held tonight across the area. See if we can bring you the Adams County Sheriff numbers for you. And as you can see, Sheriff McGee did take that lead with 80% of those votes. Rick Hallett falling with 20% of the votes. So he will definitely move on. Greg McGee will still be the sheriff of Adams County.
And we want to mention, if we can bring up that school bond, last check, it did pass the Hastings school bond. 70 to 30% was the last check. 74, 30% in favor. We've talked about that. Superintendent Craig Couts will be live on News 5 today. Let's take a look at the Adams County Assessor's race. I'm sure you've seen the signs around town. Tricia Allen, Jackie Russell. Katie,
looks like a lot of those signs out there.
It looks like Tricia Allen is going to win tonight.
Taking the lead. A pretty close race there, though, as you can see. Moving on to Buffalo County Commissioner Ivan Klein taking the lead there with 60% of the votes over David Shears with 40% of the votes. So he will move on. And Attorney General for the Democratic ticket, Janet Stewart, has 73%, a majority of those votes over Alan Urich.
And if you remember, we had Janet Stewart on News 5 a few weeks ago. She'll move on. And this was a little interesting one because obviously we heard a lot about Mike Hilgers, a lot of third-party money being dumped into his campaign. But look at Doug Peterson, the GOP, pulling out the winner. Brian Bisher, a guy we talked to a bunch of times, looks like he's trailing behind.
And for State Auditor, we have Charlie Jansen and Larry Anderson. Charlie Jansen taking that one with 58% of the votes. And, of course, Mike Foley has been the auditor for over 7 7 years, and he put his bid in for governor.
And now Don Stenberg, who's been state treasurer for a number of years. Some people wondered perhaps would he run for governor. Didn't put his hat in the ring, wins for state treasurer, but obviously we all know him very well from a few years ago when he went against Deb Fisher, Katie.
That's right, of course, and he was one of those top contenders against John Bruning, and then Fisher kind of slid in at the last minute, as we all know.
So I wonder if we'll hear from him later in the future, but for now he remains your state treasurer with 85% of the votes. We'll have more Decision 2014 coverage coming up later in the show.